Hello. Sí, Martín. No, ¿no lo cerramos con llave finalmente? No podés poner sí, 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 sí. Ok, ok, pero algo para que no puedan entrar de vuelta esta noche. Ok, gracias, Martín. Gracias. Hi, Johnny.
Mario, ¿empezaste a grabar ya?
Sí,
¿Por qué?
bueno,
24.
24.
It says V'hinicham Sham by the avod of the Kohen Gadol Uva Aaron Elo Moed Ufashatis Bigdei Abada Shelavash Bevo La Kodesh V'hinicham Sham. He takes the clothes off that he used. We're talking about the Big Day Lavon that he used when he went into Kodesh Kadoshim, and it says he places them there. Melamed Shetu'unin Gniza. In fact, they have to be buried. Nobody can use them anymore. Like when you bury Shemus. Rav Doisa Omer, no, you don't have to bury it. Ruin and Lechoin Hedyot. It can be used since a Kohen Hedyot also wears Big Day Lavan. He can be worn by a Kohen during the rest of the year. Umatam Adlomer V'nicham Sham. So what does it mean V'nicham Sham? Shelo Yishtamish Ben Yom Kippur Macher, according to Rav Doisa. You can't use it for any other Yom Kippur. That's what V'nicham Sham comes to teach me. And my La Baka Miflagi. And therefore, the Gemara wants to suggest that it's based on the following machlokes. Tamar Savar Avoidahi. We were back to whether or not you have to wear the Big Day Kahuna when you take out the ashes after you do the Trumas Hadesh. So Rabbi Yehuda will hold that it's an avoida. And that's why you need all four begodim. Umar Savar Lav Avoidahi. And the Mandomer said that you only have to wear the two begodim. Why? Because it's not an avoida. Gemara says no. Kula al me'avoidi. Everybody holds that the Trumas Hadeshin and the taking out of the ashes outside is clearly an avoida. So then why does one Mandomer hold that you have to wear Big Day Kun and the other doesn't? Rav Yehuda said that you need another pasuk to include the mitznefet and the avnet, the hat and the gartel. And we have another pasuk. Any avoida has to be done with Big Day Kahuna. You don't need special psukim to teach me that you have to wear all four begodim. So boy Ravavi. Trumas Hadeshin Bekamo. What's the shear? How much of the ash do you have to remove? Do we learn it mitruma ma'isri alfinon? Do we say that it's trumas ma'aser, which be 1 in 100, because you have to give a 10th levy to the mice. A 10th of your produce to the levy, and the levy has to give a 10th of his to the kohen. So trumas ma'aser is 1 in 100. All mitrumis midyan yalfinon. By midyan, they gave to the Beis Hamikdash 1/500th of what they took from Midian. So how much do we take off the Trumas Hadeshen? Toshma, the Tani Rav Chia, Nemer Kan Veherim, V'Nemer Lan Veherim. We learn it out from neither. We learn it where it says by the Kmitza, Veherim Mimenu Bikumtso, you lift up a Kmitza, right? A Kmitza of flour. So Malahalan Bikumtso, Afkan Bikumtso. So that's the shear. A koimet's worth of deshen has to be removed as part of the Trumas Hadeshen. Amar Rav, Arba Voides Zar Chayv Alem Misa. There are 4 avodot in the Beis Hamikdash that, see, there are some avodot where there's a lav for a non-kohen to do it, but there's no chiv misa. But there are 4 times where the Torah specifically says there's a chiv misa if a non-kohen does these avodas. What are they? Zrika, right? The Zrika Saddam on the Mizbeach. Haktorah, offering either the Ketores on the Mizbeach inside the Heichal or putting the limbs of an Ola on top of the Mizbeach. Nisuch HaMayim on Sukkis. Nisuch HaYayin, whenever you do the Minchas Nesachim. So those 4 avodot, if a non-Kohen does it, you're chayv misa. Levi Omar, af Trumas Hadeshen. Levi throws in that if a non-Kohen does the Trumas Hadeshen, he's also chayv misa. V'chein tani Levi b'masnisei, Levi learns the same thing in a brayso af Trumas Hadeshen. So my time at the Rav. Dichsiv v'ata uvanecha itach. It's referring to Aaron and his sons. Tishmeru es kunatzchem l'chol dvar mizbeach. You shall watch that only Kahanim should do these acts near the Mizbeach. Ulemi beis la paroches. And the room that is covered by the paroches, i.e., that's the Kodesh Kodoshim. Va'avadetem avodat matana. The various avodot where you give something, etein et kunatchem, v'azar karev yumad. So avodat matana v'lo avodat siluk. Siluk means to remove. So for example, only an avodah where you put something, you gift something to the mizbeach or something, that's but Trumas Hadeshen is when you remove things, when you remove ash. So an avodah siluk does not fall under this category because it's not an avodat matana. Now there's other gedorim, there's other criteria that defines which kind of avodah a non-Kohen is going to be chayv misa for. So for example, it says vavadetem, and the Gemara darshans avodat tama, a complete avoda, meaning an avoda that ends and there's nothing afterwards. V'lo avoda sheyesh achra avoda. So for example, zrika sadam. So we know there are 4 avodot. Shchita, right? You shech the animal. Kabbalah, where you receive the blood in a kli. Holacha, where you walk the kli over to the mizbeach. And then finally you do the zrika sadam. So there is nothing else after the zrika sadam. So that's an avodat tamah. That's a final avoda. For example, a shchita or even kabbalah or halacha have avodot that follow them. So therefore, if a non-Kohen would have done those avodot, you would not be chayv misa, based on this criteria. Now, Levi learned that the zar, the non-Kohen, is chayiv for Trumas Hadeshen. Why? Rabbi Rachman l'chol dvar mizbeach. Anything involving the mizbeach, and since the Trumas Hadeshen involves the mizbeach, it's chashuv, and therefore you'd be chayv misa. What does Rav do with that? So Hahula Su Yishev Azoy Shebifnim V'Sheb Mitzorah. That includes, for example, the Kohen Gadol, he sprinkles 7 times above the Kodesh Kadoshim. 7, that's why we say Achas, Achas V'Achas, Achas Ushtayim on Yom Kippur. So if a Zar does that, you're Chayv Misa. And Sheba Mitzorah. There are sprinklings that are done on the Paroiches is part of the Mitzorah purification. So even those that are not part of the Mizbeach, it's a ribui. And how does Levi learn these dinim? Levi nafkele midvar v'chol dvar. It could have just said dvar. What is v'chol dvar? That teaches me both dinim. V'rav dvar v'chol dover loy darish. Rav doesn't darshan the extra v'chol dvar. So the Gemara now says something else. Eim ol v'chol dvar mizbeach klal. Anything we're to do with the mizbeach, that's a generality. Avodat matana, but it's got to be an avoda involving gifting something, not removing something. Prat, that's a detail. Klal uprat. So whenever you have a klal uprat, ein beklal elamasha beprat. Then the generality is defined by the detail. Therefore, there would be a kasha on Levi, because that would imply avodat matana, only a gifting avoda, a zar in would be chayv misa, but avodat siluk. But for example, removing ash from the mizbech, lo, so it's kash on Levi. Amar kra ulumi beis la paroches va'avadetem. That's the pasuk. El mi beis la paroches hu da avodas matana v'lavod siluk. Only in the Kodesh Kadoshim do we say that only gifting malachos would give the zar chiv misa and not removing type of malachos. But bachutz, but outside, afilu avodos siluk. And since the base of Mikdash is outside, the mizbech is outside, so even Levi would say that even removal of the deshen, if a non-Kohen does it, would be chayv misa. Hihachi. So vavadetem nami, you could have learned el mi beis la parochas hu davoda tamov l'avoda sheishach ravoida. That the criteria where you said only a final kind of avoda, an avoda that doesn't have any avoda after it, would a zar be chayv. But abachutz, but maybe outside the Kodesh Kodashim, I feel avoda sheishach ravoida. Maybe it would not exclude those kind of avodah, and even an avodah like shchita or kabbalah or hoilacha, which has avodot after them, a zar would be chayiv on them misa. So the Gemara says, "Vavadetem hare arve kra." The pasuk brings it back to say that no, this criteria extends to all the malachos, including the ones bachutz, which would be similar to what goes on in Kodesh Kadoshim. So only avodot that don't have malachos to follow them, they've got to be final avodot, would a zar be chayv misa for. Okay. Boy Rova. Avodat siluk b'heichal mau. So we talked about Kodesh Kadoshim. We talked about outside of the heichal. What about the heichal itself? Do we say lifnim midaminan lei? Do we compare it to the Kodesh Kadoshim? Or lachutz midaminan lei? Or do we compare it to outside the heichal? Other pasha we answered mi beis ulu mi beis. If it could have just said mi beis, I would have said it has the same dinim Kodesh Kadoshim. But since it says ulu mi beis, that's a riboy, so includes even it's comparable even to bachutz. Okay, if that's the case, and therefore it's got to be an avodas tamah, elemeata zar shesider shulchan l'chayiv. Now remember, the shulchan is in the heichal, and the lechem haponim is put there. So maybe a non-Kohen who arranges the lechem haponim Be chayiv misa. And for the Gemara, ikr siddur bazichin, no, because you still have to put the kli with the spice on top of the loaves. Okay, so if a zar does siddur bazichin l'chayiv, because that l'chora you tell me is the last avodah, says the Gemara says that's not a last avodah. Ikasiluk v'aktorah. There's removal of the bazichin and then throwing the spice on the mizbeach. So it's not really an avodas gemura because there's an avodah that occurs afterwards. Okay. What about zar shesider es hamenoira l'chayim? Let's say the zar, a non-coin came in and started preparing the menorah to be lit. So the Gemara says, just pouring the shemen, there's an avodah afterwards. Ikin nesinas psila. You have to put the wicks in. Okay, nosam psila l'chayim. So if he put the wicks in, maybe it's Gemara says no, because ikin nesinas shemen or oil. Okay, nosam shemen l'chayim. Let him be chayv if he pours the oil. So ikad laka, but you got to light it. So then Gemara asks him l'chayv. So maybe if he lights it, let him be mechayiv. Or it says hadlaka lav avoidehi. Gemara answers that lighting the menorah is not an avodah. Right? The Gemara below, what? It's not an avodah about Tanya. The nasnu bnei Aaron hakohen eish al mizbeach, ve'archu etzim al eish. Limed al atzos alita, that when you light a fire, shalote ela b'kohen kosher v'kli sharis. It's got to be, it's an avodah. It's got to be by a kosher kohen, and it's got to be with a kli sharis. So the Gemara answers, Hatzosa Alisa, lighting the flint with which you light the mizbeach, that's an avodah. But hadloka lav avodahi. But lighting the menorah is not considered an avodah. Ela me'ata zar shesider samarach l'chayim. So if a non-kohen arranges the grill on the mizbeach, let him be chayiv misa. The Gemara says it's not a final avodah because ikr siddur shnei gzeri eitzim. You have to bring two special logs to place on top of the grill. If he does siddur shnei gzerim l'chayiv, and for the Gemara ikr siddur evar, you have to put the limbs of the ola up on the mizbeach. So the siddur shnei gzerim is not a final avodah. There's a statement that a non-kohen who did the gzira eitzim, you are chayiv. So it isn't a final avodah. So the Gemara says that in fact, it's a machlekes samiroi ba'aplika. Mar sover avodah tamohi, mar sover lav avodah tamohi. The one who says you're chayiv says that the shnei gzira eitzim is a final avodah. And the other Mandomer says it's not a final avodah, and therefore that's why you're not chayiv. So therefore, Tanya Kavasi de Rav, Tanya Kavasi de Levi. We have a machlokas between Rav and Levi. Rav says that a zar is not chayiv for Trumas Adeshen, and Levi said he is. Yet, so the Bryce is going to bring me Bryces to support both shitas. Tanya Kavasi de Rav, Avodot Shazar Chayiv Alein Misa. What are the various avodot that if a non-kohen does them, you're chayiv misa? So zrikas dam, bein lifnim, bein lifnai v'lifnim. Whether you do zrikas adam, bein akruvim in the kodesh kadoshim, or whether you do it outside on the mizbeach, or in the mizbeach hazav, or on the paroichas. Ve'amazeh, somebody who sprinkles the chatas ha'oif on the mizbeach, and you're not a kohen. You do an oilus oif and you squeeze the blood of the bird on the wall of the mizbeach. Somebody does nisuch habayim on sukkahs, ushlosh lugin yain every day, and you notice it doesn't mention trumas adeshen. So this baraisa supports Rav. Tana kavasa de Levi. There's a baraisa to support Levi. Avodot shazar chayav alein misa. What are the various avodot that you're chayiv misa for? So here he's right off the bat, Hameiri Misadeshen. if a Zar does Trumas Hadeshin. So you see right away that this Brisa supports Levi. The Sheva Azos Shebifnim, the 7 Azos, Achas Ushtaim, Achas V'Sholish, that you do in the Kodesh Kodoshim, V'Shebimitzayra, on the Paroiches, V'Amala Gabi Mizbeach, Ben Dover Kosher, Ben Dover Posul, and any offering of anything on the Mizbeach, whether it's a Dover Kosher or Dover Posul, by a Zar, it would be Chayv Misa. Okay. So the Gemara goes back to the original Mishnah that talked about the lotteries for which coin is going to do which avoda. Gemara asks, Lama Mefisin, why do we do a lottery? Frankly, what Lama Mefisin? What do you mean? What have we been doing the last 3 days? Kidamaran, you told us already that they did a race. One guy stabbed the guy in the heart. Another guy tripped the guy, broke his leg. And we know why there's a piyus. So the Gemara wants to know something else. Lama mefisin v'choizrin mefisin. There are 4 different paisim, 4 different lotteries that occur during the day. The Gemara says, why didn't they just do them all at the same time in the morning and cover everything? It's more dramatic to stop and do a payas. And there has to be hargosha. Like it says in Tilim, it should be emotional. We should feel what's going on public, and it's like a whole drama thing. What clothing were the Kohanim wearing when they did the lottery? Rav Nachman Amar b'Bigdei Chol. They didn't have to be wearing their Bigdei Kahuna. The regular clothing that they came to work with, that was fine. Rav Sheshes Amar b'Bigdei Kodesh. Rav Sheshes says no, they have to be wearing their Bigdei Kodesh already. Rav Nachman Amar b'Bigdei Chol di Amar b'Bigdei Kodesh ikebal Yisros techam seve'avdi. If they're all ready to go, they're going to be these mafia guys, these strong men, Kohanim, that even though they didn't win the lottery, they're going to go push their way and go out and do the avoda because they're dressed, ready to go, and we're concerned about that. Rav Sheshes Amar, who said that they have to be wearing the Bigdei Kodesh, the Yabra Bigdei Chol, Agav Chavivu and Mikra V'Avdi. We have another problem. If they're wearing their regular clothing and they do the lottery, they're going to get so excited, they're going to run in and do the avodah, even though they're not wearing the Bigdei Kodesh. And any korban that's done without the Kohanim wearing the Bigdei Kodesh passes the korban. So we don't want that. Am Rav Nachman, Meno Amin Allah. Where do I get that they don't have to wear the Bigdei Kodesh? Bigdei Chol is enough. This nan, Mesorin l'chazanim, the Kohanim were given over to like the chazan is the shamas. V'hayu mavshit no sons bigdayim. They would take off their regular clothes. V'lo yamanichal ela miknasayim bilvad, and they would first put on their pants. And the Gemara thinks it's talking about my love ba'oisen shezachul l'payis. So, and therefore they're not wearing the full Bigdei Kodesh. However, the Gemara says no. Amravuna bar Yudam Rav Sheshes lo boson shelo zachul l'payis. We'll analyze this tomorrow. Now tomorrow we'll learn at 7:30 p.m.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's a shear at 8 o'clock.
Right.
Okay.
Very good. Thanks. Good night.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Okay.